Xirtus.
Hey, everybody, tune in to Recent Tartarians.
Recent Tartarians. Recent Tartarians.
Join us on another exciting adventure of Xirtus.
These are tales you might get from books like Washington Irving's Tales from Alhambra, or you might get from making your own tales from experience in Alhambra itself. It's an instrument, a tool that you might call meta-detection, and you can use it anywhere, sort of like well-witching, to conquer the experience and to find your way. It can be commanding and liberating. It can also be defeating and humbling. You might learn things you're not ready to handle, like the unbearable lightness of being, and that heaven is 110 degrees in the shade, and that underneath heaven there is a cool place, underground, a place that stays cold, a place under rocks and under stone, where the kings of old before Rome, the kings of Tar, prayed, a place camouflaged in absurdity and discovered by brilliant madmen, a place that defies any explanation, and yet there it is, built by hand it seems, out of stones larger than any man, and there it is, in the wind and sun and rain, sitting for thousands of years. And this is a good enough place as any to get into some of the mythology of King Arthur, or Artar as he might be. A story which today is considered to have no historical significance, yet mythologically, the story of Camelot, Excalibur, and Artar is probably more pervasive than the official history itself anyway. And I do think Artar as Arthur is interesting. Any of these words are interesting when considering that their root words have particularly different uses of consonants. That Cordova could be Cordoba or Cordova, that Iowa or Iowa could be Yahweh or Jehovah. These are the musings that fill my day. These and the thoughts of Sabine, Spurius Tarpius, the king of the Sabines before being conquered by the Romans, Spurius Tarpius, a name not too unfamiliar considering Tartaria, and the father of Tarpeia, the daughter Tarpeia of Tarpius, raped and slain, conquered and thrown from the Tarpeian rock, cast off the cliff. The rape of Sabine is both the beginning of the Roman Empire and the end of the story and the conclusion after the fall of the Trojan Empire. It also ties back to the Roman pagan holiday of St. Valentine and to the concept of titanology and heart rocks. These heart rocks, which the channel Stellium 7 has illustrated with great detail, the natural systems of biology which may be present within these living rock structures, but also Rapto Tarpeia, or the rape of Tarpeia, the rape of Sabine, though obviously mythological, is clearly historical in origin, a story celebrated as if the abduction of the daughters of Tar was somehow the liberation through the Romification of their culture, seen from illustrations as being a far bit less sophisticated and a bit more brutal. There's not one painting of the Sabine rape where the men wear clothing aside from their shields and swords, nor where there are not babies present screaming upon the ground, trampled underneath the soldiers, defended by these virgins upon their death, clearly to little, if not no avail. This celebration of bride kidnapping is neither unique nor unusual, nor unfortunately passé, yet its association with the origin myth for the fabrication of Romulus and Remus's Rome, as well as its clear depiction of the destruction of Tarpeia and Spurius Tarpius, leads both one back down the rabbit hole of Tartaria and upon the realization that Valentine's Day is a weird holiday for kids to be handing out each other's names to each other's loved ones. And, as I reiterate, a holiday based upon a Roman demon with a crossbow Just seems like a weird idea. Even though it's about love, supposedly, quote unquote, beware of the bearer, just a word to the wise. Now, spiraling again down my rabbit hole of stories about my trip, how do you exactly fit a number of things into a backpack, particularly when you have so many things, if you live out of a backpack? Well, there actually is a way. It depends on how you fold things, and particularly the form of compression that you use. Abracadabra, higatus, figatus, migatus, mum, prestidigitonium. You say that 4 times, and you should be able to fit just about anything you need to into your backpack. Works like a charm. One thing becomes certainly clear. The world is far too beautiful to go unobserved. Important to get out there and experience it. And while I really love the palace and I love working there, it's just important that I spend more time focusing on the things that I enjoy doing. Life is too short to spend working on other dreams than your own. So while I'm really grateful for the time I've spent in the most of unusual circumstances, it's important not to stay in any one and to continually move on. To bask in the glory of the moment and not to become overwhelmed by it, because any moment might be beautiful, but if you spend too much time in it, it can become boring and mundane, and you can lose the beauty and stop noticing things for what they are, incredible and a gift. So as comfortable as you become, it's important to try new things, to stress yourself out, to give the TSA a hug, and to make sure you connect with the human experience. Because being a starseed and a lightworker can be cold and lonely. And it's important to remember that with every high there is a low, but with every low comes a high. And each and every one of you that was able to visit me at the Palace Theaters, I love you, and I'm glad you got to share that with me. I'm going to be missing playing with some pretty interesting toys and fascinating people. I mean, life in the business is, you can never really quit. I think you might have heard that. But it's pretty worth it. The sad truth, though, is the life in the biz can be sort of like being a lonely, blind, drunk, traveling Japanese masseuse, like Zatoichi, the wandering swordsman. Your life will be exceptional and beautiful, if not under-recognized, and in general there's a sad, empty loneliness to realization of dream that is not your own, which is kind of a bummer because there's a lot of realization of dreams that I would like to accomplish. The problem is most of those dreams are my own dreams, and I'm less interested in accomplishing other people's dreams. In fact, often I'm frightened of them. I'm never really sure if they're dreams or nightmares, and I'm concerned with those that don't take dreams seriously enough. But along the way, I've had to ask myself, who am I? What is Xirtus? And I've had to compare myself to some others. I think Marty Leeds was the one who called me Xerxes recently, which is just, either way, in my search for what is Tartaria, I've had to ask what is Xirtus as well. And I get the feeling that the two are inextricably linked. More and more, it seems like the Xirtus Sutra, as if to say Excalibur is Xirtus, as if to say the Lady of the Lake has extended a new sword, and to replace that lost Excalibur, we have found the Xirtus. And yeah, the Xirtus Sutra, it's a more internal thought about 2020. That is to say, that 2050 is as far away as 1990, as the bumper sticker on the back of my car reads. I'd rather be here now, wherever exactly here and now is. There's a lot of worse out there than here and now. Here and now is pretty good. So just next time you're watching the Grammys or some weird thing, just remember, the thing that bothers you is outside of yourself. And if it really bothers you, it's probably because it's within yourself and you want to work it out. And also all around you, here and now, there are many amazing, beautiful things that you can be a part of. And chances are you aren't even noticing. And it's worth it to just take a moment and to appreciate that. You feel me? Live in the moment. That's all I'm saying. It's just so worth it. So, but yeah, okay, back onto the Wuhan Kung Flu. So I'm sitting here in my bird mask on my way to the cold storage, and I'm looking over the memes from 4chan, and I'm seeing some snapshots, and this one sticks out. So just to reiterate, the Umbrella Underground, the Wuhan Virology Institute is under the Chinese Academy of Sciences, but certain laboratories within it have linkage with the PLA or BW related elements within the Chinese defense establishment. In 1993, China declared a second facility, the Wuhan Institute of Biological Products, as one of 8 biological warfare research facilities covered by the Biological Weapons Convention, BWC, which China joined in 1985. And Wuhan's kind of like the Chinese Midwest in a lot of ways. In fact, I always likened it to Chicago. But then again, I hadn't been to Minneapolis, so what do I know? Now, Senior scholar Eric Toner of the Johns Hopkins Center for Health Security said, "Once you're in the midst of a severe pandemic, your options are very limited. The greatest good can happen with pre-planning." That's an interesting thing to say, considering the pre-planning that went into controlling the biological chemical warfare internationally by the BWC in 1985. The Johns Hopkins Center for Health Security Center's latest pandemic simulation, Event 201, dropped participants right in the midst of an uncontrolled coronavirus outbreak that was spreading like wildfire out of South America to wreak worldwide havoc. As fictional newscasters from GNN narrated, the immune-resistant virus, nicknamed CAPS, was crippling trade and travel and sending the global economy into freefall. Social media was rampant with rumors and misinformation. Governments were collapsing and citizens were revolting. Now, this might seem strange to create this sort of simulation, but many simulations exist. In fact, I would recommend a YouTube channel, Gray Still Plays, a channel which demonstrates a number of available simulation software, including ones based on virus outbreaks, that you could test yourself. Or just watch Gray Still Plays test it, because he does some pretty crazy tests. Tests about what if the world had a different curvature and things. Definitely check out Gray Still Plays. You'll like his channel. Something to look into about the coronavirus, particularly because the coronavirus, since at least the 60s that we've observed it, European patent offices have been creating a number of vaccines for the coronavirus for decades. The European Patent Office illustrates a coronavirus patent for a vaccine created by the Purebright Institute in 2014. Who are the Purebright Institute? Looking into the Purebright Institute, first looking into the coronavirus vaccine, disclosed are embodiments of a method for collecting, extracting, or eluting proteins and antigens from cells infected with coronavirus. The coronavirus may be a porcine coronavirus, such as a porcine epidemic diarrhea virus, PEDV, or porcine delta coronavirus, PDCOV. Also disclosed are embodiments of the composition comprising the coronavirus proteins and antigens, and embodiments of a method of using such a composition. Applications for the composition include, but are not limited to, use in the preparation of antibodies against the proteins and antigens, use as reference markers for coronavirus proteins, and or use in immunogenic compositions such as in vaccine composition. Type application filed August 4th, 2016. So that's interesting because the coronavirus, a virus that has been around since at least the 1960s, has only grown somewhat. In fact, the avian flu has been far more of a concern. Since the 1980s, people have been talking about vaccines creating drug-resistant superbugs. I myself recall the epidemic of MRSA, a somewhat stabilized condition of antibiotic-resistant staph infection, which spread from China through airports in 2007 to 10. MRSA was actually pretty scary. People had to wear hazmat suits, yet somehow people forgot it, and now the coronavirus, so hey. But the Purebright Institute, as we were talking about earlier. So who are the Purebright Institute? Well, founded in November 2013, the purpose of the Purebright Institute is to improve our understanding of and the effective use of current control tools and measures, including vaccines, against peste des petits ruminants and foot and mouth disease, two serious diseases affecting livestock that are widespread in developing countries. In 2013, a grant of $189,232 were donated at the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation Discovery Center. Don't worry, Bill Gates just gives $200,000 or $1 million or $100 million to all kinds of people all the time, right? And by the way, Bill Gates Seed Bank is doing fine. But yeah, since we already went over it, the fact that the Wuhan Biological Products Center's logo is literally the inverted colors, but otherwise identical to the Umbrella Factory logo, is a bit disturbing, and as the PewDiePie meme says, I'm beginning to see a pattern here that I'm not sure I like. And so, again, looking a little deeper into the Resident Evil metaphor, in hashtag Resident Evil, the Umbrella Corporation releases a virus that infects the people of Raccoon, that's right, Raccoon like Corona City, a biological research lab with the exact same logo as the Umbrella Corporation. And you can look at that however you want to, but coronavirus, might as well stick to mountain spring water. Just make sure that Ryan Hopskabotton's organic. But there's another movie metaphor here, a time virus film. Actually, a series exists now. I saw at least the first season, but the movie still, stick with that, 12 Monkeys. A movie about reoccurring dream lifetime The Terry Gilliam Thing, a film about an outbreak and an isolated prison future with a time machine that sends prisoners back in time in order to try to isolate the cure for the virus, not in order to stop the virus, but in order to be prepared to take over the world when the virus hits. The time-traveling prisoner has reoccurring nightmares, starting from a childhood memory when, at an airport, he saw a man assassinated during the day of the outbreak, which iconoclast environmentalists, in order to protect monkeys, in conjunction with environmentalist laboratories and the elite, seed through the airports across the world terminals this virus, which annihilates 99% of the population. Later, spoiler alert from a movie from 1992, the prisoner with reoccurring nightmares of this moment, which he cannot escape despite time traveling back and forth from the 2020s back to the 90s and forth, even once getting shot in World War I. Eventually, he ends up in the airport on that day, and he becomes that man from his dream, and he sees himself as a child, seeing himself as the adult, traumatizing himself in the first place as he's being shot, beginning the entire sequence of the end of the world. All the while, the doctor in charge of his prison in the 2020s is seen on the airplane, chatting with the environmentalist with the outbreaking virus, with her own vaccine, acting pleasantly. And for some reason, that story about a little boy who has reoccurring nightmares reminds me of Bobby Driscoll, the voice of Peter Pan from the 1950s Disney film, one of Walt Disney's favorite leading actors, until Bobby's voice changed. And there's a lot of tragic stories about Bobby Driscoll, but let's start with just the facts and his relationship with Walt Disney and its questionable proportions. Bobby Driscoll became addicted to narcotics and was sentenced to prison for illicit drug use. After his release, he focused his attention on the avant-garde art scene. In ill health due to his substance abuse and with his funds depleted, he died in 1968 in an abandoned building shortly after his 31st birthday. There are a lot of stories of homosexuality, prostitution, child molestation. There are even further accusations, some of them against Walt Disney himself, though none of them are ever substantiated. However, it would be a disservice not to mention everything, wouldn't it? Bobby Driscoll would have been the obvious choice for the Sword in the Stone film, except for his issues, and instead was chosen Sorensen. Now, I wondered this recently because if you've ever watched the Sword in the Stone film, there's a clearly annoyingly overused soundtrack of the lead character, Wart, played by Sorensen, tripping confusedly and falling.
Whoa, what? Oh! Whoa, what? Oh! Whoa, what? Oh! Whoa, what? Oh! That's it. That's... Whoa, what? Oh! Whoa, what? Oh!
This reuse of a sound effect was beyond obvious to the point of being irritating for decades, and I wondered why Disney would do this. Could it possibly be that Disney was really that lazy? Like Bobby Driscoll, Sorensen was reaching pubescence, and his voice was changing. The Sword in the Stone film is only an hour and 15 minutes, making me think his voice changed too quickly for them to finish the film. This would explain some of the reuse, but I have another thought, but we'll get to that later. For now, let's spiral into Old English history, because much of the Sword in the Stone comes from this period of Sir Francis Drake. This is the point when they were deciding how to speak English properly, and deciding which English would be deemed improper. The mythology and history was being published in Historia Regum Britanniae. These stories were supposedly based on true history and went back for centuries. Although they were taken as historical narrative well into the 16th century, they are now considered to have no historic value whatsoever. This is according to Wikipedia. However, something tells me Historia Regum Britanniae is where we're going to find a lot of the actual history. And that's one of the reasons I was thinking about the Sword of the Stone, particularly Excalibur, which has a sort of Xirtus feel to it, if you get what I'm saying. Excalibur, X like Xirtus to mean out of, right out of, V, and then Burr like Berber. So perhaps you could say Excalibur means right out of tar. There are a number of different spellings that I've seen for Excalibur over the years. However, this has long been my presupposition that Excalibur is a sword that comes from Damascus steel or from the Berbers of Africa. And this would also explain a number of things about Artar and Merlin. But yeah, let's go back to Sir Francis Drake. So Sir Francis Drake was born to a Protestant farmer, the eldest of 12 children, second cousin to John Hawkins. He sailed under Hawkins in his 3 voyages in the 1560s. He survived these voyages, and in 1577 to 1580, Drake circumnavigated the globe, quote unquote, on the Golden Hind. Knighted by Elizabeth I in 1581, after she received 50% of the cargo, which was more than all royal revenue for the entire year. On March 1st, 1579, the Golden Hind took the Spanish galleon Nuestra Senora de la Concepcion, which had the largest treasure captured to that date, over 360,000 pesos. The 6 tons of treasure took 6 days to transship. Due to the excessive amount of gold that was brought to Spain, the inflation of the availability of gold actually led to gold being worth less than silver. In 1585, Sir Francis Drake returned to the Caribbean and to his life of piracy. In 1587, Sir Francis Drake attacked Cadiz and burned part of the unfinished Armada. In 1588, he participated in the defeat of the Invincible Armada, and in 1595, returned to the Caribbean to help John Hawkins. In 1596, Sir Francis Drake died of dysentery near Panama and was buried at sea. And that's just some of the official history about an otherwise confusingly manipulative liar, who was an accepted pirate and eventually a state-sponsored criminal that brought about the fall of the Western Hemisphere and made possible the rise of the international banking system. Sir Francis Drake manipulated the entire Caribbean into what must be thought of as the prelude to the Civil War, if not a continuation, if not a retroactive continuation of the Civil War centuries prior, founded around the trade agreements of the state-sponsored corporations and Native American Confederation. Sir Francis Drake said some interesting things. For one thing, in regards to history, Sir Francis Drake said that there must be a beginning of any great matter, but the continuing unto the end until it be thoroughly finished yields the true glory. This might just sound like positive affirmation to finishing a task, but when in consideration of the Masonic promise of 7 generations, dedication beyond lifetimes, by the donation of sons to a cause, and also considering this is less than 80 years before the fire of 1666 completely destroys everything that we understand about the history of London and Dark Age and medieval civilization as a whole. It makes it clear what we're dealing with here in terms of the absolute dedication by one side to completely render any sort of evidence of history utterly static.
This program is coming to you via Relay 2 satellite, a spacecraft orbiting the Earth at a speed of over 17,000 miles per hour.
Recent Talk Terry.